I opened a huge family can of worms. My wife cheated on me, and my hair turned white when I found out who it was. I am a happily married 35-year-old man. My wife is 34 and the mother to my two daughters, 6, 3. We are both from the same hometown and dated in high school. High school sweethearts, if you will. We ended up going to the same college, dated throughout, got engaged, and married after both of us graduated. Fairy tale type stuff for some people. My father was always a good father to me and my sister. He was angry a lot and drank too much, but he loved us both dearly and never harmed us. He was, however, a regular cheater on my mother, especially about 13 to 14 years ago when I was 22 and my wife was 21. At that time, my mother and he hit a really rough patch in their marriage, were separated several times. At that time, he almost lost all he had ever worked for in his business, thanks to a very crooked business partner who took him to the woodshed financially and made life hell, legal issues, etc. My mother, who was an angel, struggled to support him emotionally during this time because he was angry a lot, drank a lot, and was verbally offensive frequently. He began running around her. She found out and was devastated but forgave him. He did it again not long after. She found out again and was even more devastated. They separated again but eventually worked it out. I suspect there were a lot more than 2 times, but I know of 2 and, to my knowledge, my mother only knows of the 2 times. During this season, my future wife-to-be was with me at college. One summer, she returned home to take some classes at our hometown community college. She could earn credit there and it count towards her degree, and it was cheaper to do that during summers and stay at her parents' house to save money. I was a year older and advanced enough in my degree that I stayed at our college and took my course load there. My dad had lost one of his receptionists and mentioned to me that my wife could work for him and make some money. I relayed that to her, and she was glad to have the job because it would be flexible with her schedule and she could pocket some cash. All was well. After we got married, my wife indicated to me that she wasn't really comfortable around my dad. She said she just didn't trust him and referenced his infidelity multiple times. I didn't really understand at the time, but I agreed with her that he was really crappy for what he did to my mother. I understood why he did it, emotionally insecure, but the fact that it was a repeat offense on multiple occasions made me really hate him. But if my mom could forgive him, so could I, right? When my first daughter was born, my wife indicated she wasn't comfortable with her staying with my dad one-on-one. As long as my mom was present, she was okay with it, but not alone. This was odd. My dad was a cheater, but he's not psycho. After I pressed my wife, which took quite some time, she finally opened up that my dad was overly flirtatious with her when she worked for him those years ago. I was pissed off at him. She said that she was over it, but that his attitude towards her during that summer, while she worked for him, made her distrust him immensely. I shared this with no one. I wanted to confront him about it, but he almost certainly would have denied it, which would have hurt me, since I know my wife was not lying. It would have hurt her, since she'd emotionally moved on, and had it gotten to my mother. It would have devastated her to know that my wife and I weren't trusting our grandchildren around them because her husband, my dad, was hitting on my wife all those years before. For many years, I actively encouraged her to go to counseling, but she constantly rebuffed, and, over time, the subject was dropped, and we never discussed it again. This past weekend, my wife and I celebrated our 11-year anniversary. We went out for dinner and then drinks. When she had drank far too much one night, it all came out for the first time. My father had not just been overly flirtatious. She admitted that, while she was working with him, he increasingly went from flirting with her, then got huggy, kissy, then got touchy, feely, and then, eventually, she let his fingers do it. He just reached in my skirt and it kind of happened, were her exact words. Over the next few weeks, the situation escalated. She rebuffed most of the time, trying to get out of the situation. But several times, he asked her to work late or to visit his office when he knew no one would be around. Come to find out, a few of those times, he called her into the office, closed the door, and got touchy, feely. She was uncomfortable but admitted that she never told him no. She said this is wrong several times but never got up and left. I assume she just didn't know how to handle the situation. On one occasion, he began taking off her clothes and proceeded to give her BJ. On another occasion, he presented himself to her and put her hand on his junk and she proceeded to give him BJ. On the last occasion, they were both fully unclothed and he was pressuring her do it. She remains 100% adamant that they did not. He almost put it in were her exact words. When she said she didn't want to do that, he asked why. She said it would be wrong to me. He persisted, and when she told him she wasn't on birth control, he said, "If you got pregnant, just do it with my son, me, and tell him it's his." Scared and angry at this Olive, she finally had enough, got dressed, left, and quit the job. I am heartbroken, confused, angry, and in a total WTF stage. I can't eat. I can't sleep. I'd had a lot of anger towards my dad for years and years for what he did to my mom and the idea that he hit on my wife many times while she worked for him. But I now know the whole story. That my father actively pursued my girlfriend, that he put her in awkward fuzzy situations, and that it resulted in fuzzy activities, which occurred multiple times. My wife never said a word, during or after, out of fear of endangering my relationship with her, our family dynamic, etc. Knowing my father, I believe my wife. I know too much about my dad's history as a womanizer, a cheat, and as someone who put people in fuzzy awkward situations to distrust what she's saying. What she's describing, I can definitely see happening. It's far worse, but not completely out of character with other things I know he's done. But this takes to it a much different level. What the hell? I want to never see my father again and want to make him regret. My wife says that it's taken a lot of years, but she really has 100% moved on emotionally, and she doesn't want to open old wounds. In the meantime, I hate my father. When I press for more details, which I feel bad doing knowing that it's uncomfortable, she doesn't want to talk about it. I would also be lying if I didn't say I was confused by my wife's actions. I feel enormously guilty when I feel some negative emotion towards her because she was a victim. Combine the awkwardness of being 21, a man 30 years older, your boyfriend's father, and your boss being extremely persistent, and the man being someone you should have been able to trust to help you, not hurt you, and it just led into a really bad situation. But I suppose, deep down, if I'm really honest with myself, I'm also confused, mostly by the fact that this happened so many times and had escalated over time. My wife has always been a very strong, independent person. She is not afraid to stand up to people at all. It is not like her, even when she was 21, to succumb to pressure like that. I'm trying really hard not to victim blame and immediately feel guilty when I think that way, but, again, knowing my wife how I know her, as someone that's not afraid to call BS. It just makes it hard to conceive how she went along with it for so long, knowing that it made her uncomfortable, knowing that it was escalating, and then it was actually happening and her not saying no until it almost became full-on closeness. I just can't believe these things happened on repeated occasions. I can absolutely see him pressuring her once, her not knowing how to respond when it happened, and then her saying this is bullcrap, I'm out afterward. But that she stuck around and let it happen multiple times just seems odd to me. That's where this weird feeling of infidelity sneaks in, but I then feel horrible, like I'm blaming her when he was clearly the aggressor, at least how she tells it. Which I believe. She absolutely doesn't want me to bring it up to anyone ever. She knows that my dad would deny, lie, and deflect. It would cause a long dormant situation to erupt, causing massive family relation casualties. She'd simply prefer that we limit our family's time around him, especially our kids. And she is absolutely right on all counts. But I, admittedly, begin to question if she doesn't want me to bring it up because there is something she is afraid to tell me that could come out. I wouldn't say that to her, of course. That would make her feel guilt that she doesn't deserve. But it is a little demon in my head. I have no idea how to handle all of this. My wife has endured this secret for 13 plus years. I am very upset. I am depressed. I am furious at my father. It's still very raw and fresh to me. She talks about it very calmly, with little emotion. I admittedly don't understand why she doesn't appear more traumatized when she speaks of it. She brushes it off like it's nothing and her mood doesn't change. She can even be pleasant immediately after talking about it. She hasn't cried when we've talked about, and I'm like a sobbing baby. Maybe someone that can relate can help me understand. Has she just buried it that deep? I just figured that, as horrible as those situations were, there would be a flood of emotion about finally getting it out there, and she's not that way. Do I have to wonder if there is some guilt there that maybe she feels from not ending it sooner? Maybe she was a little more complicit than she's portrayed? I'm probably reading too much into her reaction, as all people process differently, and we are at very different stages of processing, since this was long ago for her and the discovery just days ago for me. Edit: since I posted this late yesterday afternoon, my wife and I had a chance to talk for an extended period. At the end of the day, she was a victim. My father was a very insecure man at that time in his life, and he pursued women to make himself feel better. He was very attractive, charming, and relentless in his flirting. Knowing him how I do, I completely believe my wife's side of the story and see how it could put her in a bad place. I believe that she simply froze and let things happen despite her uncomfortableness in the hopes it would go away. She's also shared other details since I don't need to go into here, but certainly make it apparent how hard she attempted to get out of one-on-one situations with him at other times when he was persistent. The only reason I hinted at the infidelity angle was that this happened for an extended period. He would send her cards, flowers, chocolates, sexual voicemails, all kinds of things leading up to and after these events. This would be hard for me to process if it were another man, much less my father. So, it wasn't so much that I didn't believe her, but, again, having the luxury of not having been in her situation, it almost sounds affairish when you hear it. In summary, many years later, and not feeling the pressure of those moments and knowing the specifics of what was going on. So your mind, admittedly, starts to wander a bit and wonder, what if? Yesterday, I said, "You are so brave. I don't know why you don't hate my father, because I do, and want to hurt him." And she responded, "I do hate him, but he's an animal and is so small, and I realized a long time ago that it wasn't worth my energy to carry that. At this point, I just want to limit my one-on-one interaction with him and be very wary of the kids being around him one-on-one." Although I want to confront him about it, she's adamant that I do not, because nothing good will come from it in her mind. She's handling this very, very well. I'm struggling with it because, 1, it's a whole new development to me, and 2, it's my father. Someone that I have always struggled to respect but did love because he's, well, my dad. Plus, my mom is such a sweetheart. She's put up with his BS for years, and if she knew all of this, it would absolutely wreck her world. Since my wife really does seem to have moved on in a mature way, I just need time to process this, respect her wishes as best as possible, and move on as well. Thanks for everyone's advice. More is always appreciated. Edit 2. Heck, we've spent so much time with my parents over the last 13 years. Vacations, holidays, etc. She has continued to see this man face to face regularly for years. I don't understand how she kept this under wraps for so long. I mean, I have noticed that she avoids any extended one-on-one situations with him, but she certainly plays like everything is fine the rest of the time. And why did she drive up to his office that night? Why? I can understand that, in a working environment, she had little choice, but there would have seemed to have been ways out of that drive to the office that night. I can also understand him kissing her or touching her, but getting so close to actual closeness? Taking off clothes? Getting unclothed together? How did that happen? How did it get that far? And she told him she couldn't have did it with him because it would be wrong to me? How about it's just wrong, period? I know that's horribly unfair to say when I wasn't in her seemingly hopeless position, but it's just what is on my mind. Edit 3. I was able to spend some time one-on-one with my wife this morning. Told her that I hated to bring this up again, for seemingly the 100th time in the last few days, but I needed a few answers. This happened 3 or 4 times. So, it probably happened more. He hit on her and tried to get her to come up to the office after hours countless times, but she was able to find ways out of those situations. but there were a handful of times when he had her one-on-one. When these acts did occur, he did all of the leading. Took her hand and placed it on his Johnson. Put his stuff in her face. She was just overwhelmed, and although she rebuffed him many times, there were a few times when she just went along, and things did occur. It's not so much that she doesn't want to talk about it, it's just that she had a really hard time dealing with it for several years after, and that, after 13 plus years, she really has moved on and doesn't want to think about it anymore. She regrets telling me even now, because she knows I'm hurting. The near closeness was the absolute tipping point where she realized, F this guy, I don't care what happens, I'm getting out of this situation. She admitted this morning that it was an offense. She just called it being forceful and pressured. I think she is associating offense with violence, and since he wasn't that way, that's why she didn't use that term. She absolutely doesn't want me to bring it up to anyone ever. She knows, and she is correct, that my dad will deny, lie, and deflect, and that would only bring about drama. Bringing it up would effectively terminate any relationship either of us has with my dad, and by consequence, probably my mother as well. She just wants to limit the interactions with him going forward to situations where she is not uncomfortable. Update. So we had prior plans to go out of town with my parent for a cousin's wedding. In light of all the new information my wife recently disclosed, I tried to cancel the trip, but my wife wouldn't let me. She said we have planned this trip with my parents for months, we bought presents for the bride and groom, made travel arrangement weeks in advance, booked a hotel, and took Friday off from work. The plan was to ride along with my parent on my dad's RV. We also planned to visit some state parks and historical sites. It would be a wedding trip/road trip on my dad's RV. My daughters were already anticipating this trip as well, and they are excited about it. Moreover, my parent would suspect that something was wrong if we cancelled so abruptly, and not to mention how my close cousin would feel about it because I was one of the groomsmen at the wedding. No amount of excuse would be good enough besides telling the truth or coming up with an absurd lie. I have no problem confronting my dad about the truth even though I know he would deny it. However, I want to get to the bottom of this, but my wife keeps acting like what happened to her was a kind of table talk that I'm supposed to look past and go back to business as usual. This is traumatic news to me. How am I supposed to look over the fact that my wife, the love of my life, has just told me that my dad went down on her, and she gave him a BJ, and they both saw each other unclothed and almost had closeness? How am I supposed to look past that? She has this nonchalant attitude about the whole thing. I was thinking maybe since she had years to deal with this misuse, she may have found a way to compartmentalize the misuse, and have created some kind of Stockholm syndrome in a spectrum toward my dad, because I feel like she is not considering how this news affects my feeling and mental state. This is my father, for crying out loud, the man that I idolized to an extent, despite his flaws, despite him cheating on my mom. He never abandoned me and my sister, he never abandoned his responsibility as a father, and as cruel as it was that he cheated on my mom. I don't think that has anything to do with me. I thought it was my mom's fault for continuing to take him back. So I can't easily cut ties with my father, and prevent him from seeing his grandchildren based on my wife's alleged allegation, which she refused to allow me the opportunity to inquire further. She wanted me to take her word for it since everyone knows the story that my dad is a ladies' man. She wanted me to believe her without question or disclosing full details. There is a big difference between being a womanizer and being a psycho. So she wants me to assume that my dad is a psycho when it comes to my daughters, and at the same time she wants to strain the relationship I have with my father without any confrontation. I was thinking that something didn't add up, and I intend to get to the bottom of this. Friday morning, we are getting ready for the trip, still have so many questions in my mind, and I haven't been sleeping very well, didn't get a good night's sleep. We were packing our luggages when my parent pulled up on their Fleetwood Class A RV. We weren't ready when they arrived, so my mom went in to help my wife get the kids ready. I had a small conversation with my dad. I'm still figuring out at this point how to confront the whole situation without any evidence. I am not even sure whom to confront. Don't get me wrong, I believe my wife, but her story doesn't add up. Even if her story is true, she allowed it to go on for all these years. After all these years, why did she bring it up now? My daughters are now 6 and 3 years old. Why didn't she tell me about this when my daughters were younger? Did she catch my dad doing something suspicious to my daughters? I mean, what is the impetus that motivated her to come clean after all these years? Something must have happened. I have tried talking to her about this, and she doesn't even want to talk about it. At this point, I have decided to stop asking questions and try to see if I could try to figure out what was going on. When my parents showed up, I didn't mention it to my dad, but I would be lying if I said that I didn't look at him differently at this point. It was difficult to act normal, but I tried my best. After packing up my things, we boarded the RV. We live on the south coast and the wedding is on the west coast, so we have mapped out our trip. My dad and my wife are the types that enjoys this sort of thing, taking a trip, hiking, visiting parks and historical area, doing adventurous stuff. My daughters just enjoy the festivity of leaving the house for some unknown destination, and I and Mom are just in for the ride. Normally when we take trips like this, my dad is the driver for most of the trip. I take over when my dad gets tired of driving. My wife is the type that likes sitting on the passenger seat with her feet on the car dashboard or on the chair, while my mom enjoys playing with the kids in the living area inside the RV. So many commented that I should get a voice recorder or a camera. I thought the trip would be a good opportunity to do that because I could place the device on strategic locations and see if anything suspicious happens. I asked my dad to drop by at a Best Buy store on our way so I can pick up something. My plan was to pick up 2 voice-activated recorders, not sure how it will help, but at least I may capture something that could provide clarity on the dynamic of their relationship. After I bought the voice recorder from the store, I inconspicuously tested it. Then I sat on the front passenger seat while my dad drove. Then I discreetly hid it underneath the passenger seat. I knew sooner or later after I leave the passenger seat my wife will replace me after she is done setting up the kids at the back. Lo and behold, it happened just like I predicted. She joined my dad in the front seat of the RV while my dad drove. I sat in the living area behind earshot of their conversation, catching up on some work on my laptop. I couldn't help thinking about how she could be so comfortable with someone she claimed is a potential offender to our daughters. This all seems like a dream. I don't understand how she expects me to just do nothing about this. I kept thinking how weak I must be in this relationship. I felt less of a man. The idea that my dad would offense her like that and she would expect to control the narrative seemed unreal to me. After hours of driving, we stopped a couple of times. I took the wheel twice so my dad can take a rest. Our final stop before we arrived at our destination was at the Grand Canyon. We stopped by at the Grand Canyon National Park to have a picnic and spend the night. I took that opportunity to review the voice recorder. While most of their conversation seemed normal, except for when my dad asked her why she has been avoiding him. She said she has been busy and she already told him that it is over. That was all I heard. At this point, we have driven for more than 22 hours. We arrived at our destination on Saturday morning, just in time to make it to the wedding ceremony. Our plan was to park the RV, rent a hotel room for a day, then move back into the RV after the wedding and then spend the next 2 days driving and camping across the west coast. I left the recorder running in the hotel room where I share with my wife and kids. My parents stayed in another room. I left early for the wedding because I was part of the groomsmen. During a rehearsal, before the marriage ceremony, before all the guests showed up, all I could think about was what might be going on at the hotel. What the VAR is capturing. I was completely not present during the rehearsal. Even my cousin noticed, but I told him that everything was fine. My sister came to the wedding as well with her family. During the wedding ceremony, my kids spent most of the time with my mom and my niece and nephew. My dad was sitting with my sister and my wife. During the ceremony, I was constantly staring toward the direction of my wife and my dad. At some point, they disappeared for a brief moment, and I was concerned about that. I thought maybe my mind was playing tricks on me. I was so anxious at the wedding. It wasn't a fun experience. I came back to the hotel to change my outfit to get ready for the wedding reception. While I was at the hotel room, I played back the recording and to listen to what the VAR may have captioned while I was gone. On the recording I heard when my mom and dad came to our room. My mom left with my daughters. My dad yelled, "I will join you guys later." Few minutes after the door closed, I heard my wife saying, "No, no," but not in an assertive way. I heard her say, "We cannot continue to do this. What is wrong with you?" "Stop, stop." I could hear my dad murmuring something, but couldn't hear what he was saying. All I heard was the sound of kisses. My wife continued saying no, 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 as the no continues to fade. Then I started hearing kisses, more kisses, kisses, turned to moaning, more moaning from my wife. I recognized that sound clearly. They were having closeness. A few minutes later, the knock at the door must have interrupted them. They scrambled. I assumed they were rushing to put their clothes on. I heard my mom. She came back to let them know that she is heading to the wedding. She must not have suspected anything. I mean, how could anyone suspect that a man could be ducking his own daughter-in-law? So this must have been going on for 13 years now. How the hell didn't I suspect anything? How in the world didn't I notice that my dad is sleeping with my wife? At that moment, I was so angry. I felt the worst state of dread, like my world has come to an end. At that point, I understood why people on TV commit crime, because that was the state I was in. But at the same time, I kept wondering why my wife would blow the whistle on herself. Because if she hadn't told me, I wouldn't have suspected anything. According to the recording, she seems like she is trying to avoid him, but not hard enough. My wife is a strong-willed woman. She is in shape and could strongly resist, and my dad would stop. But I think she wanted it to happen. The soft no was just that. If she didn't want it, she could have not allowed my mom to take the kids away to allow herself alone with my dad. She could have not created an opportunity to be alone with a man she claimed was an offender. My dad is not getting off scot-free. Now I know how much of a complete scumbag and a loser he is, and at this moment I would have destroyed him if he was here. I couldn't go back to the wedding reception. I wanted to clear my head. I wanted to be away from people. The California weather is nice. I went to a local bar on the boardwalk, drank a few, went to a local store and bought a 6-pack. With my 6-packs in hand, I went to the beach to watch the ocean. I was woken up by the sunlight in my eyes. When I woke up, I realized that I have spent the night on the beach, still in my tuxedo, white sand all over me. I remembered that I didn't go to the wedding reception yesterday. I had too much alcohol. I must have drunk the entire 6-pack plus the shots I took at the bar. It was after 7 a.m. and I couldn't account for the last 16 hours. Took a while for all the terrible emotion to come back to me, the feeling of dread, the feeling of shame, embarrassment and betrayal. I was overwhelmed with emotion. How could my own father betray me like this? How could the people I love the most betray me in such a way? And for so long. All these years, my marriage has been a lie. At that point, I was thinking that all bets are off. I am blowing this thing wide open. I have more than enough evidence to prove that my wife was lying. I now know for sure that my wife is having sex with my dad. I don't need any explanation. I have all the proof that I need. Why I was walking toward the hotel. I saw a group of familiar faces. My dad, my sister, my wife and my cousin, and some of my cousin's friends. They were all surprised to see me. They told me that they have been searching for me and they have already filed a missing person report on me. Everybody wanted answers, and I wasn't going to hold back. Right on the street, I yelled to everyone that my dad is having closeness with my wife. I didn't care what the outcome would be. I have already made up my mind that my relationship with them too is over. I have already made up my mind that I have disowned my dad. He is a pig and a terrible person. After my outburst, everybody seemed surprised and confused. My wife just kept looking away, her hand covering her mouth, and crocodile tears forming in her eyes. My dad looking down, everybody else was staring at them. Based on the reaction of my dad and my wife and the fact that I went missing, they connected the dots and are sure that I am telling the truth. My sister, whom I grew up with, knows me more than anybody, and knows what my dad was capable of. She started screaming at my dad, shouting at him saying, "How could you?" While all this drama is going on in the middle of the street, I pointed at my wife and yelled that everyone should look at her. She is a 403. I told her that I never wanted to see her again in my life. I was angry and emotionally unstable at that point, but I was not in tears. I meant everything I said, and I said what needed to be said. I went straight to the hotel to pack my things. We plan on staying on the East Coast for 2 more days, but this trip is over for me and my daughters at least. I went to my parents' room where my mom was with my daughters. She was concerned about my whereabouts. I pulled her aside and I told her everything, which I soon regretted because that started a downward spiral in her health. The poor woman has been through enough at the hands of my father. Only my sister and cousin came upstairs to the hotel room to make sure I don't do anything crazy. My cousin wanted to cancel his honeymoon on my account, but I told him that he should enjoy his special day. I was really in a bad state of mind. Later that day, my adrenaline came down to normal. My sister gave me the courage and my kids gave me hope. I booked a same-day flight that day for my daughter and mom to head back to the south, never saw my dad or my wayward wife for the rest of the day. Update. We arrived at the airport that Sunday evening at about 9:30. Our flight departs in 30 minutes. I was with my mom and my daughters. My sister and cousins tried to convince us to stay behind for at least one more day, but I felt like it's best we get home and to get as far away from my wayward wife and my dad as possible, at least for the time being. What I need at this point is to distance myself away from them and getting into my familiar routine soon enough to distract my mind away from it all. Moreover, I have plans to divorce my wife as soon as possible, so I need to get my house in order. At this point, I don't want her to come back to our house, and I don't want to see her again. We were able to board the flight just in time before the gate closed. Back when I booked the flight, I couldn't find 4 seats that were next to each other, so all 4 of our seats were scattered across the plane. It was a one-way 3.5 hours flight, so we were home in no time. We took an Uber straight to my house, after unpacking my and my daughter's luggage. I drove my mom to my parents' house. She packed her things. She was going to stay with us for the time being. She is still in disbelief about what transpired, and she has indicated that she is getting a divorce as well. My sister called me and my mom to check on us to see how we are doing. My cousins and other relatives called us as well. Hard to believe. Thanks to my dramatic outburst, everybody now knows. News flies, and every one of my close and extended relatives now knows about what happened. I have to admit it was kind of embarrassing. This is the sort of news you wouldn't want people to know about, not even extended family members, because things like this stays with you for life, even if you are the victim. I feel like the stench of my wayward wife and my pig of a father follows me around. People will whisper when I pass and talk behind my back. I still carry the blood of my father, his DNA, maybe some of that evil is in me too. Now Thanksgiving and July 4th holidays, with extended families, will be extremely awkward, if it indeed happens again. It is really sad that things went the way it did. Maybe I should have handled it a little different. Maybe I shouldn't have exposed them in front of everyone, not because of them, but because of the shame it brings to me and my daughters, even to my mom. This is the sort of thing you tuck away, quietly divorce your wayward spouse and disown your dad, and act like they never existed, and allow it to fade from memory. My wife called me multiple times, but I didn't answer. She also sent several text messages. I didn't receive a call from my dad, but my mom told me that he called her, and she spoke to him. She confronted him about the affair, and he kept trying to gaslight and deny it. She also spoke to me about all the suspicious things she noticed and all the compromising positions he had caught him and my wife in. But he managed to lie his way out of it. My mom seemed to be in the same boat as me, but she had witnessed a lot more suspicious things than me. She should have connected the dot, but my mom is more gullible than me, and her awareness is as good as mine. Now I know where I got most of my naive genes from. After my kids went to bed, I sat in the living room with my mom so we could talk things through. My mom blamed herself for not being able to connect the dot, even though she thought my dad was some worth obsessed with my wife. She said her mind never put 2 and 2 together, but now she realized how stupid she was for not noticing things over the years. She said she found it unusual that my wife tried to avoid being alone with my dad. She felt like my wife had a love-hate relationship with my dad, and my dad was completely enamored with her, but she thought nothing of it. He showers her with the present, no holiday go by that he wouldn't buy presents for her and my daughters. In her defense, without the context of an affair, it wouldn't be suspicious that a father-in-law frequently buys presents for his daughter-in-law and grandkids. She recalled several occasions over the years when she would notice something suspicious between them. We live about 15 miles from my parents. One instance was when my parent washing machine mysteriously broke down. Mom wanted to do laundry, so she told my dad that she was going to the laundromat, but my dad insisted that they come to my house to do laundry. My mom told him that there are more than 5 laundromat between their house and my house and wouldn't like to inconvenience us. He convinced her that it would be a great opportunity to see the grandkids again, being that my daughters visited my parent few hours ago and were just picked up by my wife. It was strange that he already missed them, plus I was out of town that day, so it was just my wife and daughters. Based on her story, it appears that my dad tried every opportunity he can to see my wife when I'm not home. According to what I'm getting from her story, the weird thing about it is that my wife tried to avoid my dad, but my dad was using my mom as a prop to invite himself to my house when I'm not home. Being that my mom is always clueless about anything, he took that opportunity to play games with my wife, and for some reason my wife lets him. So back to the story, my dad offered to drive my mom to my house, which she thought was odd because my dad has never been interested in driving her anywhere except for a road trip. When they got to my house, it seemed to her that my wife wasn't happy to see my dad with her, but my wife didn't voice her displeasure. While the cloths were in the laundry, she was playing with my daughters. Then at some point she was looking for my wife. She called her name, but she didn't answer. My dad was nowhere to be found as well. She went to the room to look for my wife, knocked on the bedroom door, and my wife answered the door. She was out of breath and her hair was out of place. Mom said that at that point she should have suspected something, but when she returned to the living room, she saw my dad sitting on the living room couch. She also said that there are instances, after paying us a visit, she would smell my wife perfume on my dad. She also mentions that the majority of the time she visits us, it was always my dad that convinces her to come, with the excuse of visiting the grandkids, but when he gets there, he barely spends time with the grandkids, plus he is not keen on visiting the grandkids when I'm home. It always happens when my wife is home. She also said that she caught them whispering sometimes, and when they notice her, they startle and act normal. When she tries to inquire what was going on there, they always make some incoherent excuse that makes no sense. In the back of her mind, she always suspected something. Maybe money problems, or something else, but not an affair. Now that she was putting everything together, she felt like their relationship dynamic has been her asking my dad for money and trying to avoid being alone with him. When my mom confronts him, my dad sometimes lies that I was having a money problem, and since I was ashamed to ask for help, my wife is doing it for me. Looking back as my mom was telling her story, I remember how many times I wonder how my wife was able to afford all the brand name shoes and handbags she has. She has always been a shopaholic. We make a modest income, but she has so many brand named clothing and expensive things. I used to be curious about how she could afford those expensive items, but since it wasn't affecting our finances, it didn't bother me much. I thought my wife was very thrifty, which is why she was able to afford those things. She is one of those types that has coupons for everything, so I thought she was getting all of it for a discount. After my conversation with my mom, I went to bed late. The next day I went to Home Depot and changed the locks to the front and back doors. My wife has been calling and texting me, but I haven't been responding. I know I need to respond at some point. We had a joint account, and I took all the money out of it, hers and mine. I tried to do anything I could to hurt her the way she hurt me, no matter how little they may seem. Since I took all the credit cards with me and withdrew all our money in our joint bank account, she had no way of paying for her stuff or buying a plane ticket. I know she wouldn't want to be seen traveling with my dad in his RV, so that wouldn't be an option. She sent me a lot of text messages, crying for help and forgiveness, saying that she would explain everything, but I didn't respond to her. It goes without saying that my kids didn't know what was happening and they were asking for their mom, and I kept telling them that their mom was out of town. My mom really helped in that aspect. She spends as much time with my kids as my wife does, so that encouraged me enough to know that I can do without my wife. At least till I get legally separated from her. That evening I heard a knock on my door, and my mom looked through the peephole and figured it was my wife, and she called me. I opened the door and told my wife that she is not allowed in our house. She looked really tired and exhausted. She was speaking very softly, like she didn't want anybody to hear her. She didn't have her luggage with her because she rented a hotel. I don't know where she got the money from, maybe from my dad or her parent, who knows. She told me that she didn't want to cause a scene. All she wanted to do was to talk to me like an adult, since I wasn't picking up or answering her text messages. She said for the sake of our daughters we need to talk, and to handle things in a way that wouldn't affect them. I wanted to hear what she had to say. I didn't want to cause a scene either. I didn't want any attention from the neighbors. I knew that ignoring her wouldn't cause her to go away, because we share 2 daughters together. I didn't want to let her into the house, because if my daughter sees her, they would want to spend time with her. She wanted to see them, but I told her that I'm not ready to allow her to do that. She said that's fine. I told her that we should step in front of our garage and talk if she wants to talk. I walked with her in front of the garage. She started by saying that she understood that what happened was wrong and she should have come to me about it long ago, but she thought it would just go away. She said that she knows that given the circumstances she would understand if I don't forgive her. But before I make my decision, I should read a letter that she wrote for me. She handed me a letter and then she said she would be living in the hotel, but she needs her car keys and some of her things. My kids have gone to bed at that time, but I checked to make sure that the coast is clear before I allowed her in to pack her things. She didn't pack much, just the essentials. She was really quiet, didn't make much noise, took her about 45 minutes to get some of her things. After she left, I decided to read the letter she wrote, and I would post it for all of you to see. Dear X, I am sorry for all the pain I have caused you. I am sorry for keeping this a secret all these years. You are the love of my life, and I don't know how I can carry on without you. The happiest moment in my life was shared with you. Thank you for our children, and thank you for being there for me. I don't know where to start, so let me just start from the beginning. As I told you before, your dad started hitting on me back when I worked for him when I was in college. I thought it was inappropriate and I wanted to talk to you about it, but I thought that it would destroy the relationship you had with him. I knew your relationship with your dad was strained and fragile. I knew telling you that he was hitting on me would strain the relationship further, so I kept to myself. I thought that since the school year was almost about to begin, I would be out of there in no time, so I endured. I am not trying to make excuses, but your dad manipulated me. At some point, I quit the job because he was pressuring me too much. I didn't show up to work for a week. He bombarded my cell phone, apologizing, showering me with presents, and bought me fancy things. At a tender age, I was too impressionable. He apologized to me and promised not to touch or hit on me again. He also told me that I shouldn't tell you because it would destroy the father and son relationship. I was naive and I fell for it. 2 days after I came back to work, he slowly started hitting on me again. It started with compliments, then small touches, slowly advanced to BJ, and then lovemaking. I felt like I wasn't in control because he was overwhelming. I was so stupid to have fallen for it. When I wised up to what he was doing, it was already too late. When I confessed to you about him going down on me and me giving him BJ, I felt relieved, but I'm sorry that I didn't tell you the entire truth. I really wanted to reveal everything, but I didn't know how to tell you that. The first time we had love, I quit the next day and never came back. After graduating, I really needed money for things, and he started paying for everything for me and buying presents. He used his money to get to me. I have been trying my best to avoid him as much as I can. Believe me when I say that we have only had love about 9 times over the years. I tried to resist it each time, but it was like I was being held hostage, because I was afraid of what would happen if the truth was revealed. Yes, I could only count 9 times, but he has attempted to force his way hundreds of times, and I resisted. I knew that you wanted a good relationship with your father, and I knew it would break your heart to find out that your dad is an animal. I also found out that he was having closeness with 3 other women, 2 of whom were S-workers. I have been trying to break it off for years, especially when he became more forceful. Your dad was trying to force me to have closeness with him anytime he sees me. He didn't even care if it was in front of our children. I was always scared of him when you weren't home because he would be flooding my phone with calls. He never leaves text messages, and he plays a lot of mind games. I blocked his phone number years ago, but he continues using your mom and our daughters to get to me. I was so deep that I didn't know how to dig myself out of it. He took advantage of my naivety, my obsession to material items, and the fact that I thought I could control everything. I always wanted to tell you when I felt like I was losing control, but I still believed in myself that I will be able to make him stop without destroying the family. I am not really sure what happened after the wedding, but when you flew back with the kids and your mom, he wanted us to run away together. He has been trying to convince me to divorce you and move in with him. I don't know what tomorrow would bring, but I know that I still love you, and whatever you decide, I will be here for you. After reading her letter, I knew she was lying because she just had love with him a few days ago, and I have the VAR to prove it. She still doesn't know how I found out that they had love at the hotel. Long story short, I found a good divorce lawyer, and we had an amicable divorce. She didn't fight me on anything and even gave up her interest in our shared house. We had 50-50 custody. I avoided speaking with her unless it was something related to my daughters. I also took an STD test, and it came out clean. I did a DNA test on my daughters, and they were both mine, thank God. I tried to get in touch with my dad to get his side of the story, but the coward refused to meet me. He moved to another part of town, nobody speaks to him anymore, including my sister and relatives, and we barely hear from him, which is fine by me. The only excuse I got from him was that he thought I wouldn't marry her since she was my first girlfriend. I mean, what an animal. The man tried to steal his own son's wife.